When it comes to the affairs of nations in general, God is not only a divisive term, but an inflammatory one. Firstly, just defining the term acceptably is daunting. For over 12% of the world's population, who are secularists, that's over 1.3 billion people, the very concept is dubious, if not offensive. Offensive in that it's often associated with the perceived infringement of their civil rights. For the remaining 88%, it is a divisive concept and often provocative. For 2.3 billion Christians, 1.8 billion Muslims, and 1.1 billion Hindus, just invoking God into a sentence can easily stir up controversy and contention. And rather than providing solutions to the many problems and challenges which face the nation state, it often disrupts its internal peace and destabilizes the network of already tenuous international relationships within which it is embedded. God is at best a cohesive and coherent conception when applied to the culture of people groups, that is, their mores and morals, their systems of value, and the belief systems that give those value systems their credence, each people group's traditions of jurisprudence. Yes, the God of men can be a source of cohesion and inspiration, and of course, by men there we signify species, not gender. But even here, there are formidable challenges, for there is no monolithic Christianity, Islam, or even Hinduism. Christianity, the largest of the groups, has perhaps the most internal divisions and divisiveness of them all. The differences between the Catholic and the evangelical God, or the Eastern Orthodox and the Protestant God, the ways in which each demands to be worshipped, and the doctrines that anchor the spirituality of their adherents, are oft so profoundly different, to be fair, as is the case with Islam, but they're so profoundly different as to be, and it has been, and it promises to continue to be, the cause of wars and the catalyst of major conflicts of nation, race, class, and gender. The promise of engaging and harnessing the enormous potentials of the collectively focused and harmonized and informed human spirit beckons us, nevertheless, undaunted, to pursue some sort of God conversation, but one that could manage to steer clear of all of the pitfalls previously mentioned. To do so, we would have to borrow one or two basic terms from theologians, but thereafter largely dismiss them from the conversation altogether. After all, they are the ones most culpable for the common lack of conceptual clarity and barrenness of God conversation. We will largely adopt instead a phenomenological approach to religion and things spiritual, as opposed to a theological one. We will encounter, contemplate, and consider God in the context of human experience, as opposed to God in the context of human thought or belief. And this is not to deny the profound importance of the latter, but rather to circumnavigate the impossible conundrum of harmonizing or otherwise making sense of the multitudinous and stultifying differences of interpretation and conflicting claims of doctrine and dogma that immediately flood the field once beliefs are mentioned for consideration. What one person believes can easily be dismissed by another. It's endless claims and counterclaims. It's much more difficult, however, to repudiate one's experience or the experiences claimed by others. We still retain the right to employ, and unashamedly, the language of religion and the sacred texts, and in particular the Judeo-Christian scriptures, but only because it serves as a familiar metaphoric language amongst those with whom we raise the conversation, at least at first. And for no other reason, for we maintain that the metalogic of our argumentation can easily be translated within the religious conceptions, or for that matter non-religious conceptions, of any particular people group. We claim such a path to be possible in that the essential terms and concepts we borrow from the theologians can have universal applicability across boundaries of religion, science, and philosophy. Science and theology share certain notions of cosmogenesis. Theological terms such as creative agency are largely congruous with scientific notions of self-organizing principle. Theological notions of omniscience and omnipotence, However personalized they may be in the religious narratives, they are easily conceptually recognizable in science, although envisioned more as perhaps plane of existence rather than as person, such as the grand unified field of the superstring theory in quantum mechanics. So, for conversational purposes, henceforth in this exercise, our functional trinity, so to speak, will be God, the universal center of intelligence, God, the universal center of power, and God, the source of universal creativity. Those three terms are what we will use as our functional definition for God, for God. God, the universal center of intelligence, the UCI, God, the universal center of power, the UCP, and God, the source of universal creativity, the SUC. And of course, this should immediately shut down all conversation, because who is going to make a credible claim of experiencing eternity, or to use a mathematical cognate, infinity? So the necessary concession to allow this conversation to go forward will be this: any human experience that defies current boundaries of logic as prescribed by scientific theory, such an experience might reasonably be inferred to derive from some divine power or supernatural dimension or some transcendent plane of being, whichever language you prefer to use. And so this, for now, till greater clarity comes, has to encapsulate the entire domain of our God talk, at least when we speak about human experience. So we begin our journey with a quote from the Bible. And we are employing this quote just because of its compelling rationality, not because of its claim of revelation. We might just easily have quoted Plato, Muhammad, Jung, or Einstein. But 1 Corinthians 14:25 tells us that if an inquirer comes in while people are prophesying, and the secrets of their hearts laid bare, then they will conclude that God is really among you. And this is exactly as our posture, that we can confirm the existence of the UCI because it leaks. We call those leaks prophecy. And when in our human affairs we encounter information that could not possibly derive from human intelligence or its organs, then we will have to conclude, as Paul infers, that there is indeed a higher source of intelligence. And whether we want to say God or a power of God, this is the conversations we are about to have. To prepare for Conversation on Prophecy, click link below to access Prophecy 1, the first in a series of 5, focused on the phenomenon called prophecy.